shots fired.
There's something I've been pondering on for a minute, especially in the last week or so. We took some big hits in the hip hop community. I'm gonna just get straight to it. I just need people to stop downplaying the older generation in hip hop. I think it's pretty whack, especially with the recent passing of Ecstasy from Houdini. And then you have Ozone from Breaking that passed as well. You know, when these guys passed over the past few days, it was just kind of like you saw the older generation embracing them. Then I've seen a few people that was a little bit younger than me or even my age was kind of like, who the hell are they? And I'm kind of like, how you don't know who Ecstasy is from Houdini? Like in the 80s, you know, that group was probably right there next to Ron DMC. I mean, Ron DMC was a few steps ahead of them in regards to popularity, but in regards of just music wise, I mean, it was toe to toe. And what hurts me is as a genre, we're the only ones that downplay the older generation. Like you don't see that in rock and roll, you don't see that in alternative. Anything in regards of just white artists. They artists for them in the past. You know what I'm saying? They're still able to create. They're still able to go on tour. Whereas with us, if we hear someone that's older, the first thing that comes out our mouth is, don't nobody want to hear their old ass. And it's kind of like, wow. You know, that's the truth. Don't nobody want to hear their old ass. Why you want to see them? You know, but who is it for us to be able to say they don't have anything to contribute to the culture? You know what I'm saying? Like if it's one thing I've always taken from it is you always have to go back to the past to be able to keep things moving forward. And I think even though hip hop is definitely the biggest genre in the world, they might not want to say it, but it is some things that we lack, and we lack in regards of not giving our roses to our legends, not being able to document things that should have been documented years ago, whereas we have things that are accessible to be able to make these things happen, so they're there. You know, like going back to Houdini, they have songs that have been sampled by some of the biggest hip hop stars like Nas, Kanye, someone else I forgot, but their music is still living on, and a lot of people don't know these things. And I mean, to even go forth, I know we was talking about it, even with the Young Thug comment. I mean, even though he cleared it up about just the whole Jay-Z doesn't have a discography to go into an arena, but it's just like, once he said that and knowing the influence he has, it's a lot of people that really went on and thought about that. Like, he don't. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of like, how y'all gonna second guess this man, you know? And I just don't want it to get to it's getting to a point to where it's happening a little bit too much. Like, we do have a few artists that's been able to stand the test of time, and it's only a handful full of them. But even reaching back into the 80s and somewhat into the early 90s, a lot of those guys, you bring them up and it's kind of like, who the hell are they? And it's just pretty whack.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. I feel like there's definitely a disconnect somewhere. So I don't know if it's in the education of it all, somewhere in there. There's a disconnect between the generations, older and younger for sure. And I know, like too.
Yeah, and I know, you know, some people may say, you know, some of the older generation didn't take time to embrace those younger ones, which has some validity to it. It is, but it is some out there that really want to be able to reach out and bridge that gap because it's needed. Like, you know, you go through just talking about the foundations of hip hop, and you talk about just the elements. A lot of people don't even know the elements of just how it was built or where it came from. You know what I'm saying? The founders, not trying to get all on my nerve shit with this shit and all, but like I said, when you go and you look at white artists, you know, they know their history. It's documented. I watched a documentary on the Bee Gees a few weeks ago Like that shit was incredible. And it's kind of like, why isn't something like this has happened for our huge stars? Like, you know, we have icons that are in our genre, and it's yet to be able to see something like that being put on a HBO or Netflix or what have you, you know? So that's my tidbit. Let me jump off my soapbox.
I think it has a lot to do with one, I feel like millennials and, you know, the generation before us were kind of similar as far as our experiences. So the music is similar because we're kind of talking about the same thing. You know what I mean? Like the struggle was similar. But I feel like the generation after us, these Gen Zs, their experience is so 360. Their experience is so different from anybody else's. So what they're talking about, it's not aligned. It's not on the same plane. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why the gap hasn't been connected, because it's such a huge gap.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I feel like because that gap is so large, the newer generation, they have really just rejected anything older.
Yeah.
They spend so much time trying to reject anything that is deemed old and trying to come up with something new, something that no one's ever seen or talked about or whatever the case is. So that's the reason why they don't know about the Houdinis and the Run DMCs, because they've blocked that off. Like that's so much of a contrast to what they see and what they experience today, that they're just like, that shit is old and nobody wants to, you know what I mean? Like they're in that space. It's like they just try so hard to cut that part off. And I mean, when you think about the type of music and the type of things that they make music about, like these kids is out here depressed and they out here on pills and all kind of stuff. Like I don't remember that being the experiences that rappers that I grew up listening to talked about. They might have talked about selling the drugs, but being the one who's on the drugs and depressed and suicidal, that wasn't the experience that we lived. And that's such a stark difference from,
and then another thing is the music industry in itself, though. You know, it's always with us, what's new? What's the new thing? You know, even just taking it a step further with in a sense, R&B. And we can I'll bring up R. Kelly for a moment. At one point, R. Kelly wasn't growing with the audience that he came in with in the early 90s. Like a lot of this shit started to be targeted to a younger demographic. And I'm just like, well, damn, what about the people that came in with you there? Like, you don't feel like you should be able to grow along with your audience? You know what I'm saying? Like, we see that in other genres. Whereas with us, it's kind of like once we hit a certain age, it's kind of like we have to do what the younger guys are doing and not knowing that we're looking like clowns, because the other, like, what about this whole audience you left? And they're like, well, damn, what about us? We was fucking with you from the get-go. So you just gonna go on and resort to them now, you know? And then when it gets to the end, you start making these records that sound like Charlie Wilson, and this shit don't even sound right. Sorry. You know, it's a few out right now. I mean, they tried to come back, then a lot of these records sound like Charlie Wilson's records. So I digress.
Yeah.
No, I'm 100% with you on that one. But yeah, man, I don't know. I honestly don't know why it's like that. I mean, I do understand. You know, it is a huge gap, and it seemed like shit just did a whole 360 or something. Yeah, and I mean, maybe that is the thing, but we still hearing people like Jay-Z, who's in his 50s. I'm still waiting on the next Jay-Z verse whenever it drops. I'm still, you know what I'm saying? So, and I mean, he still, you know, can compete, you know what I'm saying, with the best of them, outdo the best of them, you know what I'm saying, still, or whatever the case is. But yeah.
You also got to understand, like, I mean, we're still young, but like a lot of people from our generation, or a lot of his fans, people that grew up with him, are going to start to age out. They're not going to be buying streaming. They're not going to be going to concerts and that kind of shit. So it's like at some point he's going to get to a point where it's like, okay, his music is going to have to be valued by the younger crowd, because they're essentially like becoming what we used to be. Like, and then on top of that, like all of the technology and all of the changes that's happening, you know, with TikToks, and with like TikTok just did they just signed a deal with Warner. So like I guess all of Warner music is like gonna be, I guess you get royalties or whatever. So just TikTok now has streaming. TikTok now has contracts with like the big 3 record labels. So it's like their audience is the younger audience, because that's where they are, that's what they're doing, and that, you know, that's always been their focus. How do we make the most money in a short amount of time? Because they need to get that return back. They don't have that kind of time to be waiting on Jay-Z to spend 10 years to make a new album. They don't have that kind of time. So it's like these bigger corporations, you know, that's just not a priority for them. And that impacts, you know, what we're talking about right now, the longevity of these older artists and the longevity of their songs. Longevity does not bring in a lot of money for these labels.
I mean, not for the labels, but for the artist. The artist is able to still go tour. You know, if they only publishing a record is used in a movie or a commercial or these things, licensing, like it's still backdoor money for these artists. You know what I'm saying? Like if they're able to stand the test of time. A lot of these young guys not standing the test of time. Like they giving them all this money up front, but later on, it's kind of like once you done shit, they throwing you off to the side. You know, right. So it's kind of like to the point to where, you know, the record company is always going to get their money, but just the quality of product that's coming out is disposable. You know.